Hello, everyone, and welcome to CodeCast by STL Tech Talk, where we're going to bring you the content you want and need: instructional, informative, unique, and insightful commentary on programming and technology. My name is JJ Hammond, and I'm going to bring this show to you via me this evening. So it's going to be a little bit of fun. I want to take the moment to thank the sponsor of the show, Inertia Software, creating cutting-edge, highly scalable Microsoft technological solutions to the energy industry. And I want to thank Tech Systems. So you want to advance your IT career, but you don't want to submit hundreds of resumes to online job boards in hopes of finding your next job? Your solution is simple. Tech Systems is the leading IT staffing provider in the US and is ready to be your career partner. Their goal is to help you achieve your personal and professional goals. Contact a local recruiter today at techsystems.com/St. Louis. That's teksystems.com/STLOUIS. So what we're going to do a little bit in this episode is talk about the different ways in which you can consume content, our content, as well as you can project your coding onto the ether. You know, there's different ways to get your products out to the market, so to speak, so that when you go to get your next job as a programmer or a coder, or whatever the case may be, is that you're fundamentally prepared for the future. A couple of things that we try to do on this show is have a kind of a broad range of topics, guests. It's been kind of this interesting ride to watch as well as be a part of. But this evening, with a lot of people being extremely busy, I've been able to kind of take this time to focus on what I think is kind of a unique experience from just one person. So the first thing I'll say is that when most coders and programmers approach this idea of, okay, I want to accomplish a task, a lot of the times you don't think about what your return on your investment is. So one of those returns that you can think of is when you invest in yourself. And I know that sounds really, really dumb, but when you think about how much knowledge, actually turns into money, you think about, okay, do I buy a how to quickly learn Ruby on Rails for dummies? And do I ask somebody on Twitter a question? Do I follow massive a growing community on different forums and GitHub and the likes? I would say that for the most part, if you're a programmer, you always know that there's different tools that you can use in your toolbox. And one of those things that always keep programmers from being able to accomplish their tasks is this thought of, I can't look dumb, which is insane. Because you don't know something until you know it. So in between those two opposing thoughts, what I would say is you have to put your pride aside for just a moment. If you have any, that's a joke. But if you have to put that aside for a second, you have to really think, is this thing that I'm trying to learn, is it going to help me better my ability to accomplish the tasks before me? Now, I focus heavily on money and monetary gain. I'm not a snake oil salesman, so I'm not gonna say that money equals happiness, because I don't think that's necessarily true. But I would just say that if you're approaching, say, an open API call in an application that you're going to use for whatever reason, that you're like, okay, well, maybe I'll try a .NET type framework, or maybe I'll throw a back end on there that, just, something ridiculous. And then you're like, well, I could go, maybe to a plural site, which is great. And if you listen back to one of our other shows, we talked about all the different resources a programmer could find helpful. There's tons of stuff. Microsoft Virtual Academy, Google has their own developer stuff. In fact, a really good podcast to listen to is Fragmented. and that is by Don Filker and his co-host. I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try your name, and it's not because I don't respect you. It's just because it's fairly difficult to say, and I don't want to butcher it. But it's a really great show about developers for Android and the fragmentation that very real problem. One of the things that comes across to me when I talk to people who are trying to hire other people as a programmer, one of the biggest questions is, if I had a problem, how would you solve it? And a lot of the times, especially if you're new to this world and all that kind of stuff, this programming stuff, your first answer is going to be something that maybe like buzzwords that you hear of because you think that you can do it. Don't do that. I talk to pharmaceuticals, I talk to oil and gas, all these different kinds of things, and they always say, we don't want imposters. You're going to waste your time and our time if you say you can do something but you can't. If you think you're just going to go and learn it really fast. Now, some people are really good at that. If you're listening to this, you may or may not be, but the statistical chances of you being a prodigy are kind of low. So what I would say is that you need to invest in yourself, and you actually need to think about what your answer is to the question, how do you solve this problem? And if you answer it some stupid thing like, I would just program it in C# and, use a .NET framework and all that other kind of thing. Not so much. That's going to make that's kind of a sort of semi-old way of thinking about how applications and the internet kind of works. So the next thing I would suggest, just from a programmer, is some of the issues you have in reaching out to different communities. I call it the carousel, right? So you're interested in going to these things, but honestly, being behind a computer, I feel more comfortable here, and I know most of you do too. So when we have to get out and go to like a meetup group and all these other kinds of things, there has to be a driving force for that. Most of the time you're going to meet awesome people and so on and so forth. And then a couple of months will go by and then everybody kind of goes their own way. And then it's kind of like this carousel. It's the revolving door, if you will. So I found myself going, how can I get the most out of this event or these meetup groups? And to be quite honest, it's always about, have you thought about what you're doing? Like, one of the number one questions most people ask during a job interview is what kind of investment have you made in yourself? So what's your return on your investment? So you go in and you say, I am here, my time, break it out, figure out how much you want to pay yourself every hour of every day. And just say, even in my off hours, I'm going to be willing to learn a little bit. One of the biggest struggles with that, though, is figuring out how much you're worth. There's a lot of sites you can go to for that. In fact, one of our sponsors, Tech Systems, will definitely help you out with that. Figure out, how much your particular skill set's worth in the current market, on the open market, I should say. And one of the other thing too is when you're going to these events, you have to make sure that you go with your own agenda. So let's just say that. Write your own application, if you will, for your own agenda. What do I want to accomplish, right? And a lot of the times you're going to be really surprised at what that answer is. Most of the time you're going to say, it's I want to go learn and see what's going on because everybody's telling me that I need to learn more Node.js and Angular and all that kind of stuff. I mean, because that is by far one of the biggest, crowd pleasers that's out there. The other thing is, what kind of I guess you would say a Visual Studio, like what kind of IDE you're going to use. Man, those things change a lot. But for the most part, most institutionalized forms of, normal 9-to-5, MasterCard and all that other kind of stuff, you would see, your Visual Studios and stuff like that. So you go, okay, I'm going to go to the local .NET user group, or I'll go to the local BizSpark meetup group, something like that. So the point here is when you go in, ask the presenter or ask the person who's in charge, what exactly they're, who they are, what they're doing and how they got where they are. So the other thing that I would suggest is most of the time people are what I would say posers, right? So there's this idea of, I know this, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tear it over. And the next thing you know, you found out you just wasted a bunch of time with a bunch of programmers who knew absolutely nothing about what they said they knew about. which is extremely frustrating, especially when you've said if you have a family, you're not with them, and and if you want to think of monetarily, you didn't make money. Some business ventures do end a lot that ways. In fact, startups is another big thing that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But so you need to set goals for every day. For the most part, I would say programming offers us this. It allows us to be flexible with our time, because we can sit on the couch and code and program. We can fly around the country, that sort of thing, kind of work on our own and figure all that stuff out. Unfortunately, that is the current state of if you're really, really good, or if you're on your way to learning to be really good. I would say tech systems is a good place to start if you want to figure all that stuff out. But one of my good friends, Alejandro Ramirez, he's always trying to get me to go to a kind of a mashup of different programming languages and programmer groups. And I'm just like, I'm pushing this off. I would, if I could, I would set that time aside to go. But the other thing that I would suggest is, Skype, Hangouts, all that stuff is your friend. There's no way that there's no reason why people shouldn't be connecting more and frequent, through this medium, so we can screen share, for example, like what we do on this show. But the other thing I would just mention is figure out who you are and how you're going to accomplish what you're going to accomplish. A lot of the times we fall into paradigms of saying, oh, I'm only going to write in Objective-C, for iOS because that's where the money is, right? And I would say, right on, that's exactly what you need to do. But some of the other things I would suggest is that those things aren't going to last for an eternity. Even Swift there's a huge demand for people who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to Swift, which Apple introduced, I want to say almost a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. It's pretty crazy. But that in itself is a good example of where Objective-C, where you could see Xamarin Studios and the like going. I would add this to that when you're thinking about going to conferences, when you're thinking about going to, or when you've watched the latest tech event and stuff like that, I would suggest that you focus on the things that you don't know as opposed to the things you know, to reinforce what you already know. A lot of the times we fall into an echo chamber, so to speak. Especially with iOS, you can do that. But anyways, Alejandro was always telling me, hey, you need to go to this thing, and or this is really smart. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think one of the more frustrating things about being a programmer is you like being behind the computer, you like being in front of the computer screen, but that's an island that you can create for yourself, and it's hard to re-engage with people because everybody's spinning plates, if you will. And that is kind of an analogy that I use because when I went to the circus a long time ago, I watch people, spin plates on their fingers and toes and all this other kind of stuff. And if you ever watch the Harlem Globetrotters, you know what I'm talking about when they're like, spinning the ball. It's crazy. But that's how people are. You're always trying to balance. You're always trying to figure out how to keep things moving, keep things functional, and keep them, rotating as they should be. And it's hard to do that if you spread yourself a little too thin. And that's another kind of term that can be taken out of context. But for the sake of time, I would just say that when you try to, and when you think about these investments in your future and stuff like that, like go into continuing education or going to do certain things, it's really easy to forget what and how you function, and then are you good at that, and can you build upon that experience to carry you over to another one. So one of the other things I want to tell you guys is CodeCast isn't unique to just our show. In fact, there's a couple of different CodeCast things. So I just want to clear this up real quick. CodeCast by STL Tech Talk. That's what we do here. And what we do here is not code casting per se, because we're more of a show, right? So there's going to be a little bit of a difference in like the screencast functionality that you write into your applications. We're not, open bracket, close bracket. We're not a function or something like that that actually exists in code casting. So another thing that I wanted to mention is there's such a thing called livecoding.tv. Now, when I first saw this, I'm like, man, this isn't very smart, or this maybe not be legit, but it actually is. So that's what's really cool. You can go to livecoding.tv and you can actually watch people program. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of like if you're into the whole Twitch thing. If you don't know what Twitch is, I really can't help this conversation easier for you, help you out with this. But you can actually watch people play games on Twitch. You can actually watch people write programming code, live. So that's a lot of fun. Now, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, you really kind of you got to enjoy that sort of thing. A lot of you do. I've met you when you are inside an air-conditioned building or heated building, and you dim the lights down low, even though it's dark outside. But whatever. And then when you walk out at night, you're blinded by the moonlight, even. So, trust me, I know where you guys are coming from. So that's another interesting thing. Like I said, there's another side to programming, which is you can kind of put yourself in this island, and you're not able to kind of get out and different stuff like that. So a lot of the times we do this CodeCast show. I do several other shows actually, and one of the things that can be tiring is trying to keep up with everything. So that's why it's important to build a network for yourself. I know a lot of this sounds cheesy. I may be all over the place with this show, but it'll be all right. So when you're building a network for yourself, when you're thinking about your return on your investment, when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to go get my next job, or when you're thinking about joining a meetup group, or even when you're thinking about listening to this show or other shows like it, I would just simply interject that on top of all of that, you need to figure out how to be functional and what makes you the best programmer. Alejandro does it because he loves it, but because he does it for his family too, which is awesome. Gus, same way. He hasn't been on the show for a little while, but he'll be back. We've had some huge guests on, and I always ask him kind of off the air, what's going on, how's it, just kind of talk to them a little bit about their favorite things, that sort of stuff. And because you really find out a lot about a person, as my good friend Kevin said, that once the cameras are off, right, when they're not on. And it's really interesting to me to see how people engage with their own families, if there's a light on the door that tells them to go away, certain things like that. It's always interesting to see how they deal with when they're not working. So I would say that try to always be bettering yourself, try to always work harder, try to always, kind of be better. It when you're doing something that's completely, like if you've been playing a game for way too long, you get this weird feeling. That feeling is you need to stop what you're doing and go work a little bit. But those are some of the tips, if you will. This is kind of like a solo episode. My tip for you guys to become better programmers, and what we do here on CodeCast. I think that it's easy to say every show we're going to have a guest on, we're going to show you this awesome stuff, and that's true, and we do that a lot. In fact, I have slides and I have all this other kind of stuff on how to set up your own deal. But most of the time, I hate saying this, but this works here. At the end of the day, you need something substantial to take with you, right? Like some meaning, that you're going to think about while you're doing menial tasks, making coffee, taking a shower, stuff like that. You're going to think about this inspiration. And I would just always go back to this. I know I've been drilling this in this episode, but it's return on investment. Invest in yourself. If you've watched Shark Tank, if you've watched, all these different TV shows, even food shows have the same thing where it's, what are the numbers? People I hated taking statistics. But now I get it. Makes sense. You have to have answers to the questions, which is, what are you doing for yourself? What is your operating costs? All those things, even if you work for somebody. So even if you work for, the big names, right? uh, in your local area, so like a bank or healthcare, oil and gas, other tech companies, startups, you're going to need to know every single number that matters to you. Okay. Uh, your life is a number. So figure it out. So that's my kind of theme for this episode. Last but not least is startups. You see it on the news all the time. I talk to other programmers about it. Startups are this weird, way overused term. And if you want to talk about overloaded term, the word overloaded is overloaded. Holy cow. Anyways, so startups can be the grass is always greener on the other side type feeling. I would say that most of the time there is no grass on the other side. Grass is greener on the side. There is no grass. That's another term that some of our overseas audience may not understand. That's okay. I still love you guys. So when we think about startups, we think about wearing what you want, acting who you want to be, bringing your Mac or whatever, kicking up your feet and laying on a beanbag and programming and stuff. We think about the the kind of the Facebooks and the Google, the Facebooks and different stuff like that of the world. When you see documentaries about that, but what you don't see is the people who are still in the farms, the cubicle farms, working really, really hard to accomplish your tasks. If you listen to music in your morning commute or whatever the case may be, as your other podcasts, it's the slow grind. You're just like, man, if I could just get out of this rat race that I feel like I find myself in, it's probably a startup is where I would go. I would say not so much. The majority of the time, they being the startup themselves are completely oblivious to the numbers, right? The return on investment. It takes a lot of venture capital, takes a lot of hard work, and a lot of weird, out of routine things for a person to go through to accomplish that task. A very well programmer that I know talked to me one time, and he's like, "Man, if I could just go do what I want to do when I wanted to do it, I would totally be in a startup. I would just, because that would be my life. I would love it." And I thought, I don't think so. I mean, it's not that startups aren't awesome, because they totally are. If they're functional, if honestly, behind the scenes, it works just like a normal, any other business, but it's just kind of window dressed a little differently. You find yourself going, I see. Because the basics of business, there's reasons why people go to business school all the time. It's pretty, it's 101, right? I mean, the whole idea of business doesn't change just because you want it to. Just because you want to be a Snapchat or a Twitter or something like that. So the one thing they said was that the grass is always greener on the other side, so you think it's what I don't want to take that away from you, because I'm sure that that needs to be there. But what I would say is always keep your eyes open. Like, hey, I know this. I've done my research on it. One of the fun things about one of my co-hosts on another show is I ask him a question and we joke around, if only there was a way to find that out. Well, there is, and for many of you, you don't either Google or search or, Bing or DuckDuckGo or Yahoo it, whatever. You don't search for that question. And well, a lot of the times you don't even know what the question is. So, hey, there's an exercise psychologically for you. I would just say do that. Like, search for the thing that you want to know about and then go after it. Especially when it comes to startups. I go to a lot of brand new companies. I've seen a lot of startup. I've been a part of them. One of the things that always holds you back is you figure out, hey, money isn't there. Who needs money? Well, we all need money. It's very important, and it doesn't always work out, especially working with others. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier in the show, which is you need to build a network of people that you can work with that is legit, that has an agenda, right? Don't turn away people just because they have an agenda. I mean, sometimes they can be a little, sociopathic, but whatever. But if you can use them and they can use you, it'll all work out. For the most part, though, I would say that startups can be a place where good ideas go to die, or they go to live for a couple of years and then they die. So, there's a weird trajectory there. So I would say work part-time with a startup as opposed to thinking that that's the way to go all in with, because at the end of the day, you still have to, deal with yourself. And if you make huge mistakes, and if you move from a job and different stuff like that, it can be really scary, and you can go through a lot of, a lot of anxiety. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show with just saying, I want to thank the sponsors of this show. Again, Tech Systems, or in particularly this guy named Brad that we work with. If you want to just test the waters, right? Like, and see, okay, what are the numbers on people who are making a dollar amount, who know what they're doing, who knows what they're talking about. Man, have a career, like somebody, a career partner to help you out with that, because I bet you, for the most part, seeing what I've seen as far as programmers, either overseas or in the United States, it's all being farmed around. All right. So if you can figure out how to work the overall system, like how to work the playing field, if you're designing an app and you don't know UX, or you need a design person or whatever, there's always a way. I remember that from a science fiction show that I used to watch. There's always a way. So, and that rings true. So, but you got to believe that, and then you got to reinforce that by acting on it. So I wanted to, again, do something that I always do, which is tell people about charities. Now, charities that you should all know about are about to come out of my mouth here in just a second, but this is important to me. If you don't care about charities, then just, I don't know what to say to you, because they make you better by knowing how you can help the society that you're in. I suggest everybody take a moment and look up, if you have family members, or if you don't have family members, if you have friends, or if you don't have friends, or if you hate somebody else, whatever the case may be is, but you get a feeling that makes you want to be better than yourself. Look for charities that you can contribute something to, a local food pantry, something like that. People always ask me, why do you put that in this show? It has nothing to do with coding and programming. And I would beg to differ. There are tons of charities that need an updated IT department, frankly, or help with, administrative things. I'm using very general terms, I know. So don't judge me too much, because I'm sure half of you do anyways. But so I would say, learn how you can help. How I can help is, we have this show, and I can have your ear for 15 seconds to tell you about charities I want you all to know about. Something that's important to me, Hope Line, a domestic violence prevention and support organization sponsored by Verizon. So if you hate them, then yeah, whatever, but they still support this program, which is awesome. Hope for young adults with cancer. They didn't ask me to say anything. I just say it on every show. Healthy Me to go. Go to healthymehub.com for more information if you want to learn how to or how to be a part of. It's a local St. Louis thing. This idea of not with readmission rates to hospitals, to bring those down, because most people don't know that the statistic of people who leave the emergency room or hospital, their readmittance rate is crazy high. So to bring that down, this Healthy Me Hub is trying to work in a HIPAA compliant way, which they are, to help with that. So that's kind of some interesting stuff. So I would normally take this time to ask people that are guests on the show what they think as far as their thoughts of how this episode went. But I'll turn this to you guys, and gals, when you're listening back to this show, I would like if you've listened to the entire thing, which is insane to listen to me for this long, by the way. But I got much love for you. If you have, write in, because this is not the typical show that we do. But if you would want something like this as a I don't know, way to blow off steam or whatever the case may be is, or just kind of think of this as a menial task to complete, to allow your prefrontal cortex to kind of do its thing and work in the background. Right into the show, CodeCast. Let's see, that's at CodeCastSTL or hashtag CodeCast. Others use the same hashtag, just FYI. But you can do hashtag STL Tech if you want to make that specific. So hashtag CodeCast and then hashtag STL Tech. That's STLTECH. And that would be specifically for us. So if you're like, man, I hated this show, how dare you do something like this? Please let us know. Or if you're like, hey, this wasn't too bad, that's fine too. I wouldn't mind you guys doing that. But so let us know what you think about these kinds of shows, and we may do them more in the future or never do one again. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the fans. We all love and thank you for your support of the show. So from the entire CodeCast crew, consider yourself informed, stay frosty, good coding. We're out.